Hi all, and welcome to Prepare Like a Pro live chats. My name is Jack McLean. I founded Prepare Like a Pro early in the year. I'm a strength and conditioning coach working with male and female footballers all across the country. And if you're interested in working with me, I have a website, preparelikeapro.com, where you can check out my website and check out my professional services. I'm excited to announce and welcome Andrew Lambart. For those that don't know Bart, he has been the head physio at the Hawthorn Football Club for the last 16 years. I was lucky enough to work with Bart at Hawthorn, where he was heavily involved, not only leading the medical team, but working closely with the high performance team, managing individual training loads, as well as return to play rehabilitation. During his time at Hawthorn, he was involved in 4 premierships, has completed the Kokoda Trail with staff and players, and in 2018, Bart was awarded a life member of the Hawthorn Football Club, which is a true testament to his commitment to his craft. He's the current AFL Physio president as well. So we're just waiting for Bart to join us.
How are you, Jack?
Going well, Bart? Yourself?
Yeah, going well. I managed to pick up a little bit of that intro. Very, very nice words, kind words.
Kind words. I snuck in the Kokoda Trail, mate, to give you a few brownie points.
Well, I noticed that there was a picture of me and Sam Mitchell at the Kokoda Trail. Certainly brings back some good memories.
I think you're in my top 5 most likes. You're at about 123 at the moment.
Oh, wow. Okay. That's interesting. That's a bit of pressure, is it?
No, it's good. It's good. Feeding lids.
He lives around the corner. I'll be sure to pop round and let him know.
Let's get straight into it, mate. I'm interested to hear the beginning of your celebrated career. When did it start? When did you first decide that you were going to be a physio and take on the studies of the physio degree?
Yeah, okay. Gee, we're going back a fair way. So I did physio straight out of school, and I really probably got into physio at that stage as a 16, 17, 18-year-old kid. I was into footy, but I was also pretty strongly into athletics. So I was an 800-metre runner, trying to make it in the big international world, and I probably saw it as a way to stay involved in sport in some way because I love sport so much. So that's how it sort of started initially. Yeah, and then I guess when I realised that the track and field career wasn't going to kick off, I then started working with a lot of the track and field athletes that I was training with because I was a physio at that stage. So I actually moved back to Geelong, which was my hometown, and I moved back to Geelong to train with a pretty successful running group down in Geelong. Yep. With guys like Lee Troop, Georgie Clark, Craig Mottram, and those guys all made the Sydney 2000 Olympics. So it was sort of at that point in time that I started working with elite athletes. And I guess my initial foray into elite sport was really with track and field. So I worked with Athletics Australia from 2001 until 2006, which I went to the 2004 Athens Olympics as Australian track and field physio. Was one off.
Fantastic. Yep.
And then and there was a couple of Commonwealth Games thrown in there as well, a couple of World Championships. So yeah, it was pretty. That was my start. But obviously, the world of a travelling physio with track and field is a long periods of time spent overseas. So yeah. I guess when an opportunity came to get into AFL, I jumped at it really, and that was at the end of 2004 at Hawthorn Footy Club when Clarko arrived, and yeah, there was a bit of a clean out really of the whole staff football department out of the Hawks, and so that's when it all started. So
fantastic. And in 2004, what was the medical team? What did it look like when you started there?
Well, we had 2 part-time doctors. So that was one of our doctors is still with us now, Michael McDeesey, and Pete McQueen. He's actually just retired. He was at North Melbourne and at Collingwood Footy Club, and it was a bit different. We had myself, I was part-time, and another physio, Randall Cooper, was also part-time, and we sort of job shared, but we needed 2 physios on match day.
Yeah,
so we had 2 physios. We had a podiatrist. We had pretty much 2 in the strength and conditioning team. So it was a very condensed footy department and medical team. The elite performance team was a lot different at the end of 2004 to what it is now.
Yeah, for sure. And how did you guys manage rehab? Was that like if you're both at game day, did that mean for the guys on Saturday at the club, they sort of did it on their own, the players drove it, or?
Yeah, often, or one of us would be there in the morning if we travelled. Look, in those days it was quite interesting, but there weren't that many interstate games, and yeah, I guess a lot of them were Saturday. We had a lot of Saturday games in those days. That was when the Saturday afternoon time slot was the traditional 2 p.m. time slot on a Saturday was first and foremost. So no, we just seemed. It's an interesting question, but I know that we would have been out there early on a Saturday morning before a game, working with the rehab guys, and then going straight into the game.
Yeah. And so going back to your progression, so with the track and field, was that you were travelling with the team? So that was a paid role. Was it part-time, full-time, straight away? Like what was the progression in your track and field as a physio? Yeah,
well, it was slightly... Look, it's really different. I guess there might be some young physios sort of listening in, but I think progression into elite track and field is, look, I was passionate about athletics, and I think that's the first thing you've got to be. You've got to be passionate about the area of work that you're undertaking. And I was certainly really helping young athletes, probably to try and achieve what I was unable to achieve. So I did do a lot of, I guess, volunteer stuff. It didn't seem like volunteer stuff because I loved it. I was going to the athletics meetings anyway, the track and field guys, in that instance. And then it probably just slowly progressed into, obviously, when you travelled away, that was full time. So you got paid a weekly wage by Athletics Australia, which wasn't a huge, wasn't a huge wage, but it was fun, different. We were travelling overseas, spending, up to 3 months overseas, missing out on the cold Melbourne winters, and spending time in Europe, in Zurich and
nice.
All these wonderful places. So, and I guess at that point I was pretty firmly entrenched. I was doing some work with obviously Athletics Australia, but I was also working with Victorian Institute of Sport. So I was doing three sessions a week at actually in it. It was actually where Collingwood train now, the Holden Centre. So I worked at Olympic Park Sports Medicine Centre, the Victorian Institute of Sport, a little bit of stuff with Athletics Australia, and that was how I sort of, I guess, cut my teeth, so to speak, elite sport to start off with. But it certainly was pretty challenging. It's not like a football club role, that's for sure.
Yeah. And did you have someone that took you under your wing back in those days and sort of, I guess, mentored you or gave you guidance? Is there someone or people that have influenced you strongly throughout your career?
Yeah, absolutely. You've got to have a good mentor, I believe, and there were certainly lots that I can recall. I mean, physios, and she's mainly in research now, but Kay Crosley, I actually started working in at Olympic Park. She went on maternity leave, and she was working a lot with track and field athletes. So I got my start in at Olympic Park. And Peter Buchner, who some people heard, but he's been around the world and done lots of things, but he certainly was a big support for me early on as well, and actually was instrumental in our team starting at the Hawks at the end of 2004. That was a lot of with Brookie. So, yeah, look, they're two key people, but gosh, in my athletics days, there were lots of physios that I learned so much off. And I guess it's like anything. It's like a young athlete that's trying to progress in the world of elite sport. It wasn't dissimilar to a young physio trying to progress, and you've really just got to be really open-minded, take it all in, have a real learning, a want to, and a need and a desire to learn. So I think that's where all started for me, really.
Yeah. Well, you're getting some nice love hearts there. Someone's liking what you're saying. Did you see those?
Yeah, I saw some love hearts. Do we know who did?
Might have been Will Days joined in.
Hey.
You got a few of the boys signed in. Maybe it was one of those.
The goal.
So 2004 to, I guess, throughout the last few years, you mentioned there's been a lot of change in the sort of the performance medical team. What are some areas for developing footballers that you've seen, like systems that have been put in place? What's the biggest area of growth, whether it be hamstring prevention or groin injuries? What's an area where you've seen the industry grow the most?
Now I'm saying, there's people on here because I'm getting heckled here by little chat.
Some private messages on the go.
Maybe.
Are you allowed to read them out? 4-time premiership physio Andrew Lambart.
Bearing me up here. Well, I think one of the main things that has changed from the early days is that, you might remember that well, it was a fair while ago, but it was when I started at the Hawks. Osteitis pubis was a really big thing, and if you got osteitis pubis as a young footballer, which lots of people did. I mean, Hodgie, I think had it. I think he had it in 2002 and 2003, and I think what the main thing that we've learned since those days is that we've become a lot better at implementing really strong programs that, yes, help troublesome calves, Lids. Definitely we've got for troublesome calves. But also, look, our groin management programs, our preventative programs around groin and hip, our hamstring prevention and strength training that we certainly do and implement at an early age for these young footballers has been a major change. And I think a part of that, we've been able to do that because really of staffing. You know, in those days, as I said, we were really light on, but just I guess probably 5 years from that point in time, I guess when you fast to 2010, and we were starting to potentially have three physios working full time in a club. So we were able to have potentially one physio that really dedicated their time to the developing players. And you'd know what that was like, because I guess when you were at the club, that was one of your roles. You were sort of
absolutely.
Those developing players, and you worked pretty strongly with Anthony Fernan at that time, who also had a really strong passion for these developing young players. So you put these programs in place, and you really roll loads, and that was what that was right up your alley, wasn't it? I mean, that's your cup of tea, it's your bread and butter, and you know how to do it, and that's where all these guys that are logging on and being a part of your program get the benefit of these in terms of controlling loads. So, but there's some of the changes. The implementation of GPS units has been a real game changer, because we now know how much load we're getting into young players, and we know that young players can't take as much, or as much load as some of the more mature and older bodied athletes.
Yeah, the OP is the interesting one, because it definitely had a lot of fear around it. And then it seemed to just drop off, but there was still groin overload injuries, groin tightness, whatever you want to call it. It was had a different word. And then I've noticed it sort of seems to maybe have crept up a little bit, where now it's diagnosed. Why did the industry go away from just saying it was OP? Like, was it being over?
No, I think
diagnosed back then, or
I think there was a lot of hip joint pathology that was thrown into it. So we went through an osteitis pubis era, and then we transitioned into a lot of young people having hip surgery, hip scopes to try and help with cam impingements and things like that. So we've probably gone away from the hips now, and we know how to manage even some of these hip joint pathology a little bit better. So no, there's certainly, it's still a really relevant injury, and particularly young developing athlete, it's really important. But I just think we know, as I said, we know how to put the programs in place a lot better to help support those injuries and actually prevent those injuries. So they're still there, but we're managing them a lot better, and we're preventing them a lot better as well.
Yeah, for sure. So groins, there's been a huge amount of growth in that area. What about, is there any other areas that you've seen the industry really develop quite significantly over your years?
Look, there's constant work going on in regards to hamstring injuries. One thing I would say is that the recurrence rate for hamstring injuries has decreased a bit. So we now know a lot more about, I guess, the real anatomy of what happens when you strain your hamstring. So we're trying once again to put really diligent programs in place to help strengthen hamstrings, but we also know that it's not just a strength deficit that causes hamstring injuries. There are lots of things. They're multifactorial. So it is related to load and fatigue and even sleep, wellness. All these wellness markers, are really important also. So I think that what we're doing is we're gaining more understanding in terms of all the things that contribute to injury. So we're a lot more holistic in terms of managing and thinking some of these things now. But hamstring injuries, look, we know a bit more about them. They still occur. The data has been very constant over probably a 10-year period.
I guess the game. I don't know if has it got more demanding potentially. Like it's got faster.
Exactly what I say. There's no doubt the game has become faster and more dynamic. Players, there's the stress that players put through their bodies, is a lot greater. But that's not only through the game itself, but it's the training that the guys are doing. There's a lot more football-specific training that are with AFL nowadays.
Yep.
Like in pre-season, when I first started, it was sort of, Clarko was always a little bit different. We always got the footies out before Christmas, but, in some clubs you'd say, oh, no, the footies aren't coming out until after Christmas. So prior to Christmas, it was just straight. Right. So I guess that's one thing, that there's a lot more football-specific change of direction, deceleration, acceleration work that's occurring at training now, which puts a load on the body, puts a lot of load through the knees and calves. That's for you, lids. Yeah. So there's it's just the demands are a lot greater, I would say.
Yeah, definitely. And for anyone that's watching as well, this is a Q&A, so don't feel like I'm the only one that has to ask questions. If you want to ask Bart a question, just hit that question mark button on the bottom of your screen and you can type away and we'll get to you at some point during this chat. So from the developing footballers, there would definitely be a few that are watching. So what are some things, maybe they might not have access to gym yet, or are you strong on what age a kid should start lifting in the gym? Is there an age? Is it a training age thing that you think?
I think it's a little bit horses for courses. I think you can do, if someone's pretty young and underdeveloped, I still think that there's some really good lifts that you can do, as you'd know, some really good stuff that you can do in the gym and some things that you should do. But yeah, look, it is really variable, and I don't think there's a recipe necessarily for everyone. But I think that the most important thing is to start gradually and start at a lower level and progress in a graduated manner. That would be my advice, to younger footballers for sure.
Yeah. And like you've seen a lot of successful footballers at your time at Hawthorn. Is there something that footballers can do in the off season that you've seen has had a trend of success, whether it be track and field, wrestling, get a combat coach, or psychology? Any tips or tricks that you feel people can be doing away from the club or during off season, or
all of those things? I think, well, you did mention like the psychology side of things. I mean, the one thing I would say of the very successful people and footballers that I've got to know over the years, and not just footballers, athletes, they've all got they've got a steely resolve. They've got sort of like an inbuilt determination to keep pushing. And I guess one thing that I've noticed as well is that they're very resilient. They cope with setbacks and bounce out of them really quickly. Now that may be some long-term setbacks, but it may often be responding to immediate feedback as well. So some of these guys that are really successful seem to be able to take the feedback on board and not hold on to it, just move on, and then come back and think about it later on.
Yeah.
So I guess that's one. So I guess certainly the mental side of things.
For sure.
One area that I could say for young developing athletes to certainly sink their teeth into.
And do those elite players that you noticed, did they have it from day one, or did they work on that and develop that during their time at the club?
Of them, so it's an interesting question. Some of them it grew. Some of them, as they were sort of young and a little bit more immature, they didn't quite have it. They didn't quite get it. Perhaps they were a little bit more happy-go-lucky, in their days. But then they certainly developed it later on. So, and I think that's the other thing that I've found is that when we're talking about development, a lot of these successful people have had really inquisitive minds. So they haven't necessarily just done things because someone's come in and told them to do it. So they've really asked questions and done their own research and tried to work out why, the why, just not the how, I guess.
Yeah, sure.
And that probably leads into some of the things that you were talking about, like, in terms of the wrestling, if you think that if someone's identifying and thinking, oh, I've got a real, I'm not holding tackles, I'm not really strong enough in the contest, then that could be really important for their development. So I think, being able to identify areas of weakness is really important. But I'm a strong believer as well, Jack, in that in many cases, we often concentrate too much on our weaknesses and sometimes just forget about our strengths. So I guess my mentality has always been, well, you've got these strengths that have got you where you are, and you can't forget those. And all athletes will have some really important things that are, that are their strengths. So they can't work on their weaknesses and neglect their. That would be a really important thing, I think, for a younger athlete.
Yeah. Yeah, I think of that quote. I think it was Chris Judd. If you've got lemons, make lemon juice. type of thing, like, which it is, I know, something that Sam Mitchell was strong on, wasn't it? Like something he learnt during his time at Hawthorn, strengthen his strengths rather than focusing all his energy on his weaknesses.
Well, absolutely. I mean, someone, I think, and Mitch wouldn't mind me saying it, but, he wasn't the most physically blessed athlete. He had really good characteristics in terms of his change of direction, and he made the game slow down. But I think if someone had got to Mitch and said, we really need to try and make you into a better runner, and, yes, he can improve those things, but never, never compromised his strengths. And I think that's a really important point.
Yeah, that's a great point for developing footballers. Would you apply the same sort of philosophy as a physio? Like, have you focused on that in your journey and in your, where as a physio you focused on your strengths to get where you are? Or how does it work? How does that transfer?
A little bit in some ways, but I think that there are so many areas, in terms of knowledge base that you need, and some of that you get with experience, and you do need to just grow with that.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't say that necessarily. No, it's probably not something that I'd apply as much to my profession in terms of physio. But I think it's really important. I mean, I guess, so if I identified one of my strengths as rapport with players, well, you need to make sure that you're continuing to develop, your rapport with players. You can't let that go by the wayside and become, really dictatorial. What's the word? Be a dictator. Yeah, so I think that there's, look, in certain elements, I guess, in life, you could apply those philosophies, but probably not as much in physio.
Yeah, for sure.
My opinion.
Yeah, and so in terms of player management, that's something you talked about a bit earlier with wellness, and then GPS had a fair bit to do with it. What were the strategies before? Well, probably wellness, questionnaires might have been around for a long time, but before GPS, was it much more the hands-on screening is sort of what you would do, and then report to the coaches or the conditioning guys, we're going to have to pull this guy back?
Yeah, we always did a screening, sort of the wellness screening. But you're right. Look, GPS were just starting to come on board when I started, but when I first started, there were 3 players that would have GPS in a training set. Might give it to one mid, one forward and one back, and then you try and extrapolate the data and get a bit of a rough idea about how much the training loads were. So it wasn't an exact science. There was a lot of art to it.
That's amazing. That's because that's what a lot of local community clubs are. That's how they're starting now with GPS. So it's amazing that an AFL club started that way as well.
Yeah, but likewise from the physio point of view, like we do musculoskeletal screenings, so we use load cells and things like Nord boards and the groin bar or the force frame to measure and track recovery post games. Now we didn't have those sort of things. We didn't have those sort of things at all when I first started. It was a little bit more of the art, and once again developing, I guess, that rapport and the communication to be able to get the players to trust you and to make sure that they got to learn about their body as soon as they could. So, but that's one thing that's changed. There's a lot more science to the whole game of AFL football now than what there was when I first started.
Yeah. So Perry Ferez, what shoes do you recommend? Asics, Nikes? I guess there's Adidas as well. What would be?
I've got to watch out for my personal sponsors here. No, I don't have a personal sponsor, obviously, but it depends on your foot type in many ways and comfort. Look, personal preference, really. Like I personally like to, not that I can do that much running anymore. The old body's not quite up to it, but I personally really like Asics, and they suit my foot type. I find that they provide really good stability and performance. It's a really good cross. But I know that there's some people that probably have, better biomechanics than me that feel really, really comfortable in a pair of Nikes and Adidas for that matter. So it's one of those things that you could go to a physio and get them to assess you for the type for your foot type and give you a recommendation around that, or you could go to a sports podiatrist. So, for example, many years ago, that's when we started. We've had a sports podiatrist, Nikki Quigley, and she's still working with the footy club, and she's got her own practice down in Beaumaris or Sandringham. So, going to have a chat to a sports podiatrist would definitely be something that I'd recommend.
Yeah, absolutely. That's good advice. And then this same person is getting some sore calves after running, what presentation exercises can I do? What presentation? I assume that's a typo.
Yeah, well, it's interesting.
Prevention, I reckon it'd probably be. What prevention exercises, yeah.
So really sore calves, and that's something that I would, best exercises for shin splints, okay. Look, and some of these things, it's really, once again, I don't really think there's a recipe. It depends on your foot type. It depends on the type of footwear that you're getting around in. And it also depends a bit on load. So how quickly you've spiked your load. So certainly, quick spikes in loads or quick changes in loads can result in muscles becoming quite sore. And certainly shin splints, along or medial tibial stress syndrome, where the muscles of the medial calf compartment can get quite tight and irritate the periosteum as they insert onto that medial shin or medial tibia.
Yeah.
So, look, it really is. I think that once again, podiatry or sports physio can help assess the foot type and recommend footwear. But the reason you get shin splints is probably because you haven't got calf capacity. You haven't adapted to the loads that you're requiring. So things like calf raises, weighted calf raises, and some dynamic calf progressions can be really good exercises. But once again, it's really hard because there's not a recipe out there. It needs to be tailored for the individual.
For sure. Yeah. And last one from Perry Ferez. What is better, deep tissue massage or cold water therapy?
For footballers, okay.
I remember you posting an article to the group last year about
well, yeah,
contrast.
There's not enough. There's actually not that much evidence in terms of either of those modalities improving recovery. So that's a fact. So I think once again, it's personal preference. I personally think that those things can help recovery in an elite athlete. But I think it just depends on what you like. Some athletes will hate cold water therapy, and will prefer massage. My only comment to that is that massage is a pretty passive technique, and yes, you can do a little bit of self-massage, but often it requires other people to do it. So I think that really trying to develop good strategies where you can self-manage is really important for athletes that haven't quite got to that elite status. You're spending a huge amount of money on massage and that sort of things, not as much money on cold, what's he said, cold water therapy. My preference to that would be movement in water. I think movement is the best form of recovery. So it may well be that it's in the ocean where it's cold, but movement in the ocean, getting into a pool and doing some active recovery would be my recommendation in terms of the best methods. But once again, personal preference.
Yeah, and the best bit about that as well is it's free, like you're saying, so anyone can do it. Yep. Anyone watching can do that one. So here we got Willie getting a sore knee after running and explosive movement. Any advice? You're getting a few general questions, but we're going to get similar answers, I reckon, guys, if we don't get a bit more specific for Bart here.
Like physio, like online physio chat, aren't I? But getting a sore knee. There's lots of structures in the knee. If it's related to deceleration and change of directions, often that can be related to kneecap. So your patellofemoral joint, it may be, but look, it's too hard having not assessed. But I think once again, it's with most things, it's controlling loads and it's progressing your loading in a nice graduated manner. So I just take it, if you're getting soreness, take it back a step and do an exercise or do a movement that is non-painful, and then gradually layer the complexities of movement on top of that.
Yeah, it sounds so simple, but listening to the body can be, it's something that's probably not underutilized, is simply just taking rest and listening to your body's feedback. Now, this is a follow-on comment, occasionally kicking some photos, but otherwise kicking is typically good. So it's having a bit of a good one there.
I'm not going to make any comment. One of our other physios, we get stuck into Benny Jansen about doing kicking floaters and doing double-handed ball drops, but generally I'm not going to advice on kicking technique.
Yeah. So 2020 was pretty challenging. Obviously, staff were down. Everyone had to adapt quickly on their feet with the change of structure, as well as how many different. So you started in Queensland?
No. We started in New South Wales. Had 3 weeks in Coogee and then 3 weeks in Perth. 2 of those in quarantine, but that was actually a really elite training environment. That they had the hotel for 2 weeks was, had a gym on site. It was 5 minutes from training you. It was really good. And then we spent about 5 weeks, about 5.5 weeks in Adelaide. And that was pretty challenging, to be honest, because we were in the Barossa. I honestly don't really think the Adelaide government wanted us there, so they put us an hour away from Adelaide, and that was pretty challenging. So you talk about being adaptable, and able to cope with change. That was certainly one of those things where you had to be adaptable.
Yeah. So, okay. Well, we'll wrap it up then. We'll go towards next year. What are you hoping for? What are you excited about for 21? You know, how are you spending the rest of 2020 as well with the break that you do have? And what are you looking forward to towards next year?
Yeah, well, I think COVID normal. That's for sure, and where things are looking up.
They're going well. Yep.
Yeah, I felt as though 2020 has been so inefficient in terms of use of time because of COVID. I'm looking forward to getting some of those efficiencies back, and I'm also just looking forward to change. You know, change can be really important, and I think that potentially Hawthorn, you know, we're going to lose, a few players. We've already lost some, and there may be some more that decide to explore other options. So that means that the playing group's a little bit different, more opportunities for some of the younger players, which is always exciting. Because I think that when I look back in terms of why I like, working in a footy club or working with athletes, it's actually to try and help athletes achieve their goals. And so whenever there's change, when change is afoot, it means that there's an opportunity to help another young athlete sink their teeth into being an AFL footballer. So that's quite exciting. So that probably keeps me going around year after year.
Fantastic.
Some of the guys, don't worry, I'll get heckled for this because there quite a few. There have been quite a few of the players listening in. So and. Or that as soon as I start to get cranky or a bit long in the tooth, they'll let me know, and there'll be one of them, one or two of them will tap me on the shoulder and say, "Okay, Bart, you're done. You're an old cranky bastard now. You're finished." I don't think I'm
gone.
I don't think I'm there. Yeah. So
it's good, mate. Fantastic.
Yeah, no, and mate, good initiative. It's really great that you're getting some followers and trying to, well, as the business name says, prepare like a pro, trying to bring some of the professional and elite environment to to some of the young and upcoming footballers and community footballers. I think it's a great idea. So well done to you,
thanks,
and people get involved. Listen to Jack.
Yeah, well, I think it's definitely a good thing hearing, from people like yourself, which it is incredibly rewarding to hear through your experiences that you've had and how you talk about from starting off in track and field, experiencing that and moving into football and how it's changed over the course of the last few years to where it is now, and that you still have that passion to helping developing athletes that sounds very similar to like when you started is quite amazing, mate. So hats off to you. Thanks for joining me tonight. I definitely like sharing my information and helping out as many people as I can during this climate, but to have people like yourself on board as well and sharing your knowledge makes it a lot more valuable. So very grateful for having you on, mate, and it was good to have a chat. And even when technology lets us down, we just keep coming back.
Just roll with the punches, Jack.
We just roll with the punches.
We'll be right.
Resilience.
Yeah. Oh, no, thanks.
Awesome,
thanks. Good to chat, and